Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim SWARTZ.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what's going on Jupiter and Mars.
Well, Tim, you're in a strange mood tonight. Why are we outdoors looking up at the stars? Is this another UFO skywatch?
Oh, no. I'm hoping to get a glimpse of our guest tonight. I hear he may be on one of his astral voyages, and I thought we might see him floating by.
Okay, but I don't know if that's possible. I think, don't you become invisible while you're in your astral body?
I'm not so sure about that. Our friend Maria the shaman says she's seen all kinds of creatures and beings floating by when a portal or gateway opens. It can be really strange, really weird, really bizarre. But hey, that's our show.
Yeah.
Look, here comes one of those creatures now.
Whoa! Okay, well, this one doesn't look very friendly, so get. So I suggest we get back to the KCR studios and hide under our broadcast desk. Shoot, get out of here!
Oh, if we concentrate hard enough, maybe we can make him dissolve. Abracadabra, dissolve. No,
it's me.
I think as a world, we're all dissolving.
Well, and Tim, this is the perfect opportunity, I guess, to get out there that you've got some items for sale.
I've got items for sale.
Yeah, don't you have like what was it,
SpaghettiOs? Yeah. I've got about 15 cans of SpaghettiOs and beef stew in a can, and enough hot dog and hamburger rolls to last for a while. I figure we'll have a 4th of July party.
Okay, well, I've got the hot dogs and hamburger, so maybe Jim can provide the barbecue and some charcoal. We'll have to conduct it all over Skype, though.
Well, I never want to see another hot dog again. I am so tired of I hadn't had a hot dog maybe twice a year. And then when I had to start doing a little cooking for myself, all I have is a microwave. I seem to have stocked up on hot dogs because they do come in all kinds of flavors and hot and spicy and this and that, and turkey and pork and beef and God knows what. One brand even with cheese inside the hot dog, which was a total waste. But I just grew a dislike for hot dogs now. I'm over that. I would like an Outback steak, and they advertise that they deliver, but it ain't true. I'm like 6 blocks away, and they won't deliver because it's too far away. They're in Australia. I mean, they can come here and set up shop, but they can't deliver steak and broccoli a couple blocks away. So I find that very misleading. But anyway, we're not here to talk about food necessarily, although I am. It is something to rejoice about. But there's nothing else to do, actually. Sleep and eat food and watch. I'm watching on, I think it's Netflix, Ozark, which is a very good series. I guess they're into 3 seasons. I'm only up to episode 5, but it's flowing very nicely. I kind of recommend that. But anyway, let us get on with the show for the evening. Tim, what are we talking about tonight? What's our topic, and who is our guest?
Well, our guest tonight, and I'm just always so happy when Jim can join us. He's been on our show several times before. Let's welcome Jim Willis, returning to Exploring the Bizarre. And Jim tonight is going to be talking about his new book, The Quantum Akashic Field. Now, after graduating from Eastman School of Music, Jim became a high school band and orchestra teacher during the week and a symphony trombonist on the weekends, a jazz musician at night, and a choral conductor on Sunday mornings. Now, Jim is the author of 9 books on religion and spirituality. He's been an ordained minister for over 40 years while working part-time as a carpenter. He's been the host of his own Drive Time radio show, an arts council director, an adjunct college professor in the fields of world religion and instrumental music. Now, Jim is also the author of really some of my favorite books, Ancient Gods, Lost Histories, Hidden Truths, and the Conspiracy of Silence. The one we're going to be talking about tonight, The Quantum Akashic Field, A Guide to Out-of-Body Experiences for the Astral Traveler. And coming up very soon, I think it's supposed to come out in May, Hidden History, Ancient Aliens, and the Suppressed Origins of Civilization. So, Jim, thanks for being with us once again on Exploring the Bizarre.
Good to be with you both. Although, Tim, I began to worry when I listened to you sing "Fly Me to the Moon." I worried a little that you had been self-quarantined a little too long, but
Well,
but it's good to be with you.
Well, we're happy to have you here. But before we start talking about the Akashic records, I mean, since you have written and researched into hidden history and the mysteries of history, have there been? Well, we know that there's been other epidemics. Of course, the last one being the Spanish flu. I don't know why they necessarily blamed it on Spain, but that was 1917, 1918. I know about that because I was editor of a short-lived magazine back in the 70s called Front Page Disasters, which I actually enjoyed doing because I learned a lot about history and a lot about disasters that I didn't know before. But have there been cases in history that you know about where civilizations or groups of people may have been wiped out? Now, I think of Roanoke in particular, where the settlement totally vanished.
Yeah. There have been a number of times. As a matter of fact, the identity of America really can be traced back to the Europeans when they first came over here. They came bearing diseases that the native population simply could not handle. When the Spanish came into Florida, for instance, they brought cholera, and they brought measles, and they brought mumps, and the Indians had no defense. Within just a matter of a decade or two, 95% of the population of Florida, the Indians had died. That's how difficult. That's how tough it was. Same thing happened in New England. The Europeans came in, the English especially, and they came across these great open fields, and they thought they were natural because they were overgrown, and they thought that was the way it was supposed to be. But what actually had happened was, the early fishermen who came over to the Outer Banks, when they would put ashore for supplies in New England, Cape Cod, and all the way up Boston and all the way up north into Maine, they brought diseases with them again. And the New England population of natives just absolutely, it just decimated them, A really interesting example was the first European who made it down the Amazon River. It was accidental. He didn't mean to do it, but he got stuck and couldn't get back. And he reported along the way great villages in the Amazon, huge villages with great populations. And it was about 50, 60 years before anybody followed up. And by the time they followed up, they didn't find any of those civilizations that he was talking about in the Amazon. And they began to think, well, he just made it all up. But now, with the advent of the rainforest being taken down so much, they're discovering a huge civilization that existed there and died within that 50 years of the first European contact. And it was probably due to diseases. It was just a real tough time. And I don't think that's going to necessarily happen to us, but boy, it certainly is enough to make you take these things seriously. It's happened before, and we're getting an idea that we aren't quite as in control, I think, as we thought we were.
Well, that's for darn sure. But now, before we get on to the Akashic records, because I know that's your new book, what about the colony at Roanoke? What in God's name happened to those people?
Boy, it's hard to tell. It's one of the biggest mysteries of American history. They were there, and when they they were hurting. We knew that they really had troubles, and they needed more supplies, and so they sent the ship back. But the ship got caught in the middle of European wars and didn't get back for a year and a half or so. And when they got back to Roanoke, it was deserted, and nobody knows to this day what happened. I don't think that was probably due to disease. I think probably what happened was the people just got desperate, and they had to join native tribes, moved inland. Possibly war, we just don't know. But that's another great mystery.
It is indeed. Now, you are well versed on history. I can tell that. What is your background? I mean, how did you come to study and become so knowledgeable about this?
Well, it's a funny thing. I went into the ministry back in early 1972, something like that. Went to seminary, and back then I was
you and Paulina. You and Paulina. You and Paulina.
Oh.
You and Paulina.
Yeah, back then I was under the illusion that I had a great interest in history and biblical history and in spirituality, which quite frankly has led to the Quantum Akashic Field book. But when I went in, I just assumed I was going to be surrounded by a great community of people who were going to be interested in the same things I was. I thought ministry was just going to be one long line of spiritual growth. And I soon discovered, as I became the pastor of my first church, you get involved in the mechanics and the politics and the doctrine and in the dogma and in the minutia, and you're always planning what comes next, the next sermon, the next church service, the next this, the next that. You get involved in the community and doing pastoral counseling, and somehow 40 years goes by, and you just say, what happened? So when my wife and I retired 10 and a half years ago now, we came up here to the woods of South Carolina, and we really came up here deliberately to go on a retreat. We wanted to confront that essential spiritual reality that I had been seeking my whole life. We wanted to put it mildly, wrestle with God. I even had that Bible verse in my mind. It comes from a story of in the book of Genesis. Jacob and Esau, the two brothers had a big fight, and Jacob had to flee for his life, and he took off and came back years later to reconcile with his brother Esau, with his brother Esau. And in the night before they met, he was worried what was going to happen. He was pacing back and forth. And the Bible tells a story about how he met this guy by the riverbank and wrestled with him all night. And as the sun came up, it turned out he discovered he had been wrestling with God. And he said, I will not let you go until you bless me. And that was the Bible verse that was on my mind. I came up here to the woods, and I wanted to confront God. I wanted to say, I want to know the source. I want to know Manitou. I want to know Spirit. I want to know God. I want to know Brahman. However, whatever name you want to give it, I want to know that, and I wanted to wrestle. So we came up here to go on a retreat. It was we built a house back here in the middle of the woods. We started self-quarantining about 10 years ago, and it's been working fine. And lo and behold, it came to pass that our prayer was answered. we wrestled with God and would not let go until we were blessed. Now, God appeared to us in quite a different form than the Christian God that I had always pictured. It came in much more of a shamanic experience, but that was kind of the beginning of it. I have to tell you a sequel to this story, though. A number of years ago, I was asked to go over to Cornwall in England and give a talk there to a group about ancient religion. And so while I was in England, I had to visit this little town called Fenny-Compton, which was up northwest of London. I had to go up there because my ancestors, hundreds of years ago, used to preach up there. They were ministers, clergy in the Church of England. And I got up there, and there was the church where they used to preach. And the town historian let me in and showed me the plaque that had the Willis name on it that showed how far back they went. And I stood in the pulpit, and while I was in that pulpit, where my ancestor had stood every Sunday hundreds of years ago, I looked across the sanctuary and saw a stained glass window that I had never seen the subject of the stained glass window before. It was a picture of Jacob wrestling with God, saying, "I will not let you go until you bless me." My spiritual ancestor somehow passed his DNA on down to me. And that was exactly the verse.
Synchronicity 101.
Yeah, there it is. Synchronicity. Yeah.
What we talk about all the time plays a big part in not only in the paranormal but in life. And I don't think that most people realize it. I mean, I managed to come up with a 450-page book just about my synchronicities, and we're not talking about looking at the clock and seeing it say 444, or thinking of somebody and they call on the telephone 2 days later. I mean, stuff much more intricate that it's impossible that it wasn't planned by someone or something, or I don't know. It's just impossible really to describe. So what would you say before?
It makes us understand that this life is a lot more complicated than we think. But when we came up here to go onto that retreat, I hit the books, and thank goodness for the internet. It makes research. You can do so much more research from home now than you used to be able to do. And I came up here, and I just found myself fascinated by ancient civilizations, because we live here on a place where, according to an archaeological dig, which is right down the Savannah River from us, called the Topper Site, human beings have been here for thousands of years. I'm thinking, and now, according to the Topper Site, perhaps 40, maybe even 50,000 years, there has been an ancient culture that lived, at least seasonally, right here on the same land. And when I began to be in contact with this culture through meditation and through dowsing, and began to discover what was here, my interest in history all of a sudden took off. History classes used to be some of the most boring classes I ever took in high school and college, but that changed when it became real. That was where my interest came.
Well, what would you say? I know this is a subject of a future work that you're involved in now. What would you say, maybe as a teaser to our listener, is the biggest discovery or the most hidden fact about history that the public is not aware of?
I think it's the part that continually baffles me is that I have grown convinced that we are a species with amnesia. We have a history that I believe is a lot more ancient than we have been taught. I think there have been numerous lost civilizations, and I think these people, from what I can see about their mythology, from what I can see about the great monuments they left behind, the stone megalithic building that they did, and from what I can hear about their oral history, I am absolutely convinced that they saw the world different. They had a different kind of mind than we do. They had what I like to call a psychic toolkit. They were in touch with the other side. I think that ability is still inherent in us, but in most of us, it is atrophied just because of the kind of life we live. We live in a very left-brain, technical, fast-moving society that just doesn't take the time to be in touch like as they were. I think it was Socrates once said, "Beware the barrenness of a busy life." And out of history, that is the big thing that I draw most of all, that we have a busy life, but in many cases, it's a barren life. We don't know how to sit quietly and meditate anymore. We don't know how to consider the big questions. Who are we? What's it all about? This is what I draw from history, and this is what I try to recount in my books, to try to put ourselves in the place of these people who had this tremendous psychic ability to do things, perhaps even move great stones with their minds, with psychokinesis and that kind of thing. I think we are going to discover that we're at a crossroads right now. We need a deeper, what I call spiritual life, and that's the greatest lesson that I draw from history, I think.
Well, now, so are you a believer like in Atlantis and Lemuria and these other?
Yeah, I never was. All my life, I thought those were just myths. I had read Plato and read his account of Atlantis and everything else. But the farther I get into it, the deeper I get into it, the more I like to call the Atlantis tradition. The more that means to me. I think the Atlantis tradition that Plato talked about and that many other ancient texts talk about describes a civilization that was once highly advanced in technologies that perhaps we don't understand. It wasn't a computer type wires, generators. I think it was much more of a psychic, mental type technology. And I think they were destroyed. And I think that was the basis of what we call the ancient gods. These people, when their whole civilization was destroyed in a day and a night, and I think there are physical reasons for that. We can probably get into those. But when it was destroyed, I think there were groups of them that managed to survive. And they made their way throughout the world. They made their way into Turkey. They made their way into Egypt. They made their way into Central America and eventually into Peru. And I think what they were doing in these places was jump-starting their own civilization. And because they were so much more advanced than the Stone Age people they were dealing with, the Stone Age people, who were our ancient ancestors, remembered them as gods. And I think this is the basis of those ancient gods that we hear so much about.
Well, now, do you think that there's a possibility that some of these civilizations or groups of people might have gone inside the much discussed Hollow Earth?
And Jim, you're gonna have to make that a yes or no answer, because we have to go to our bottom of the hour break here. So when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Jim Willis.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight, our guest is Jim Willis. Now, Jim, I'll give you the chance to answer Tim Beckley's question about the possibility of underground civilization, but we had to interrupt you for our break. So now here's your chance to answer that.
Well, let's put it this way. I have a hard time accepting it, but I'm not closing my mind to anything, because there is more new information coming out all the time. I just find all of this stuff so exciting. I just love to read about it and study it and talk to other people who have their opinions. It's wonderful. That's one of the great things about studying history. And I think if we do it with a closed mind, because something doesn't seem right to us, we're in serious trouble.
That's right. You keep your mind closed, just new information just bounces right off.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's talk about your most recent book, The Quantum Akashic Field, A Guide to Out-of-Body Experiences for the Astral Traveler. Now, I have to say, Jim, this is a great book. I learned a lot from that, but I wanted to ask you, and I'm sure our audience would like to know too, what does the quantum Akashic Field have to do with out-of-body experiences?
I think the quantum Akashic field, let's take the words one at a time. First of all, Akashic is an old word, comes out of India. It's from the Sanskrit, and it was made especially popular by Irvin Laszlo, who talks about Akasha. And in his way of viewing the existential reality that really is around us, he talks about the Akashic field as being the field in which all possibilities and all probabilities exist. I like to look at it this way. Picture us in the source, the place where we all come from. And you can call this anything you want. You can call it God. You can call it Brahman, as the Hindu Jews, Manitou, the great mystery, as the Indians in the Northeast, where I come from, used to call it. The ground of our being, all that is, whatever you want to call it, a source is as good as any. In that source, there is perfect unity. There is only oneness. And the one thing that perfect unity cannot experience is individuality. So if we are going to experience everything there is, we have to experience individuality. So we move from the source. Our energy, our essence moves from the source, separates from the source, so that we form the possibility or the probability of everything there is. And that's the Akashic field. The Akashic field operates in a different way than we do. In just the last 100 years, I think our scientists have begun to understand with mathematics what the ancient shamans, what the ancient gurus, what the ancient dowsers and mystics have known for thousands and thousands of years, that there is more to being outside of this material existence. I know there's a lot of scientists that like to say the material world is all that there is, but no, I don't think that's reality. I think that's our reality. So we move from the source into the Akashic field that operates under the rules of quantum reality. From there, every possibility is going to be realized. Every possibility can happen. Every probability is going to be realized. From the quantum Akashic field, we move through the newly discovered Higgs field. That's the field where energy is converted to mass. That's the field in which we live. We live on this side of the Higgs field. Now, this, of course, is a simplified way of doing it. But when Einstein discovered that E equals mc squared, all he was saying was energy equals mass, which is here, times the speed of light squared. When we come out of the Akashic field through that Higgs field, which has just been discovered recently by the great particle collider in CERN in Switzerland and in Europe, we come over here, and all of a sudden our energy takes on mass. And the trouble with that is that when we take on mass, when we take on these bodies and we enter into the field of evolution and enter into the perception reality that's around us, in a sense, we're surrounded by this five-fold fence, as I call it, this pentagon. And the fence is made up of our five senses of sight and smell and hearing and taste and touch. And it surrounds us, and every bit of information that comes into our minds, comes into our brains rather, comes into our intellect through this fence. And in one sense, this has been a wonderful thing. It keeps out too much information. I mean, for instance, just take sight. We can see the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet of the spectrum of color, and that's all our sense of sight allows. But we know there's a lot of colors up now, I mean, a lot of vibrations up above it, microwave and all that. We know there's a lot below us, but our sense perception is just limited to that one thing. And it's the same thing with touch and taste and hearing and smell. So here we live in this fence, and we have the audacity to say that's reality. I don't think so at all. I think the real reality is outside the fence. Inside the fence is just how we experience it. And so when I talk about the quantum Akashic field and out-of-body travel, what I'm talking about is developing a system to be able to, in effect, free our minds from the information that's fenced in by our senses, to move outside of our perception realm and to see a greater reality on the other side of the fence. And that's really, to me, what out-of-body travel is all about.
Now, I was a big fan of Robert Monroe's books.
Yes.
And the way that he described his personal experiences, his astral projections, as he called it. He described it as like, his spirit essence, or astral body, would pop out of the physical body and go around to different places. Now, from your experiences, though, you have a feeling that it may not be exactly like that. That we may be kind of almost anthropomorphizing this experience.
Yeah. Frankly, I wouldn't be talking to you if it hadn't been for Robert Monroe. He was the one who invented the word out-of-body experience, and he founded the Institute, Monroe Institute, up in Virginia, where I studied for a week with Bill Buhlman, who I think is one of the greatest out-of-body practitioners, teachers in the world today. And Bob Monroe also invented a wonderful technology, which I use all the time in meditation, called hemisync music. His original field was in technical aspects of radio and things, and he invented this process. Just to make it real quick, what it does when you put on earphones, it adjusts the vibration sequency to get your the two hemispheres of your brain in sync, so to speak. That's why he calls it hemisync, and I use that in my own. Even at the end of his life, though, Bob wondered a little about how he experienced it, because here's the problem. When I'm talking about getting outside of our perception realm, outside of the fence, language was invented to describe our perception realm. It was invented to describe the things with which we are familiar. When we get outside of that perception realm, we experience things which are at the time when you experience them, they seem perfectly normal. They usually seem beautiful, lovely, wonderful. But when you come back in, your brain takes over and you try to explain what you saw. So you can't say this is what it was. All you can say is this is what it felt like to me at the time. And actually, Bob talked about two different kinds of out-of-body experience. The first was what he called etheric or local travel. That was within the realm where he would talk about his body, for instance, going to visit his daughter. His spirit going to visit his daughter, his soul, his essence. That's called etheric travel. But there's another kind of travel too. Well, etheric travel, for instance, was also, the Monroe Institute was very important when dealing with the military, when the military was trying to talk about and understand remote viewing. This was etheric travel. It was within our own earth, so to speak. Astral travel is quite a bit different. In astral travel, you are actually traveling outside of anything we have experienced. You're talking about other dimensions. You're talking about other places in the multiverse. And you're talking about seeing things that words just simply don't explain. Now, we have to say, does something within our body actually go? That's how Bob Monroe started. That's believing. Toward the end of his life, he began to think, maybe it isn't that. Maybe it's more involved in the quantum language of entanglement, where a particle here is entangled with a particle there, and they can exchange information instantly, not at the speed of light, but instantly, no matter how far apart they were. And at the end of his life, he began to wonder whether the quantum language better explains it, because it talks about the fact that we are here, but we are also there at the very same time. And quantum reality is weird, but it says particles even can be in two places at the same time. And so maybe what we are doing is experiencing something that where we are already there. It's not a matter of going there. It's just a matter of, in effect, we are entangled with it. So the information from there is coming into our minds, our intellect at the same time. Does that all make any sense? It's a complicated answer, but
yeah, see, to me, it makes sense because, I've always had the theory, especially when it comes to dreams, because, sometimes you have dreams that you can tell they're just dreams. Other times you'll have a dream that seems to be so real. You'll be involved with people in that dream that you even have memories of past experiences with those people. And then when you wake up, there's almost like this sense of loss that you're not with them anymore. And it has made me wonder whether or not our consciousness actually extends across the multiverse, parallel worlds, and that as we're experiencing this reality, at the same time we're experiencing maybe an almost infinite number of other realities. So possibly when we're referring to astral projection, we're just becoming through meditation or whatever conscious of these other realities.
I believe you're absolutely correct. I would agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of people who kind of scoff at out-of-body travel, when you begin to really talk to them seriously, I think they have had the kind of dreams you talked about. As a matter of fact, I think that's one of the purposes of dreaming. This world is so different. I think at night we sometimes have to return to get recharged. And I think many of our dreams are really out-of-body experiences. Strangely enough, I've kept a dream journal now for 10 years, and I was amazed at finding some symbols in my dreams. So many of the dreams that seem so vivid to me involve being out and doing something, and then forgetting where I left my car, or getting in my car and not being able to find the way home. And I discovered that in my brain, the car was a symbol for the vehicle that is my body. And my consciousness had actually left my body. And when the experience was over, I had to go look for the car, look for the body, so that I could come back home again. I think dream interpretation took dare I say, a quantum leap forward when we began to take it seriously and equate it with everything from lucid dreams to out-of-body experience. Yeah, I think you're right.
In your book, now, for somebody who is listening to this show and wants to go out and buy it, I mean, do you provide, I hate to use the word methods, but I'm going to use that. I'm sure you've got a better term for it. But do you provide ways that people can try this for themselves and practice and maybe have their own experiences?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I really consider this a how-to book. I have a 5 or 6 point method that I use. I'm not saying it's the only method. I'm saying it's just the one that has worked for me. And I developed this through study at the Monroe Institute. And I think, as a matter of fact, when Bill Buellman does his seminars, he tells people that if anybody really wants to experience an out-of-body experience, if they are willing to devote 30 minutes a day for 30 days and make it the most important thing in their life, if they're willing to say, at this time of the day, I'm going to do this and nothing else is going to get in the way, it becomes that important. He said 30 minutes a day for 30 days, and you will have an out-of-body experience. I tried it, And I've got to say, if I had quit on day 28, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But it really does work. You have to find a time of the day when it's not just convenient. You have to find a time of day when everything comes together. Your body has to be relaxed, and your body is almost asleep, and your mind is fully awake. Now, if some people like to do this early in the morning, but it doesn't work for me after I first wake up, because I'm always thinking about what my day is going to do, and I'm trying to think, oh boy, how long do I have to go now before I can get about my day? And so that doesn't work for me. And if I do it late at night, it doesn't work, because I try to meditate and I fall asleep because I'm tired. Believe it or not, the only time that worked consistently for me, and I did this for 30 days, was, I hate to say this, 3 o'clock in the morning. I found myself waking up at about 5 minutes of 3 to 5 minutes after 3 every single morning without an alarm clock, anything. And at that point, I had already had some sleep, so my body was fully rested, but it really wasn't ready to get up and go yet. And my mind was fully awake. And so I would get up out of bed, go to the special place that was different, put on the hemisync music, and I would meditate. And I used to think that, boy, 10 minutes of meditation, your mind goes crazy, it's chattering and everything else. But I found that not only was it not an ordeal, I found that I really resented when an hour went by and I had to quit for some reason. Something said, you've got to go back. And that is what began it for me, is that making sure it was the most important thing in my life. I felt that I wanted to know the nature of reality. And from 3 to 4 in the morning, that's when it happened. Now, sometimes it was longer than an hour. Sometimes I would have an experience that would go on for maybe 2 hours. Sometimes nothing happens. I don't want to give the impression that it happens all the time.
Sure.
But for me, that worked.
Now, some people I know that I've talked to about this are interested, but they're somewhat afraid. I mean, they're like, well, what if I'm traveling outside of my body and the silver cord breaks and I can't get back in, or I come back and find that something else has taken my place, or that while I'm out, I'm going to run into, I think Robert Monroe called them parasites, things like that.
I used to be able to say I've never had a bad experience. Mm-hmm. I think the universe, the cosmos, Akasha, the spirit source, I think we are cared for too much. I think we are looked over and protected in ways we can't understand. And I wrote this in a book, in my book, Supernatural Gods, as a matter of fact. I wrote that I've never had a bad experience. I was almost done with the book. And that night, I had my one and only bad experience. So I'm sure it was kind of a way to keep me humble and say, hey, Jim, you don't know all this stuff. And yet, I don't think, I think we are so intimately connected with the body that I don't think that's going to happen. Now, I have to give a caveat. I have come across people who had died and didn't realize it, or people who had died who were so connected with a particular place or on Earth that their spirits did not realize they could go on. Now, they were not in pain or they were not in panic, but I have had a couple of experiences of being able to help people go on to the light. And I don't say that they were in any way uncomfortable. They just weren't quite sure what was going on. Now, the Monroe Institute runs a whole week-long seminar up there and a whole group up there devoted just for this, to find people and help them move on to the next level. As a matter of fact, they have the resources to do a lot of the research, and they can get names and then go back and look at records and see. I've had a lot of experience as a minister of being at the bedside of people who have died and come back, near-death experiences. And I've had people, wish I had been more open-minded when I was younger in ministry, because I'd have people say, well, there's my Uncle Fred, there's my Aunt so-and-so, they're waiting for me. And I wouldn't, discredit them, but I would say, oh, that's great, and I wouldn't believe it. Now I believe it 100%. I think they really do see that. I think when kids come here, young kids, they have imaginary friends, and we try to knock that out of them. Oh, now you're just making it up. I think they really do. I think they are aware that they are being watched over. And if anybody's worried about out-of-body experiences, the words that are associated not only with out-of-body experiences, but with near-death experiences are always words like love, compassion, acceptance. I think we are watched over. I don't think really we have anything to fear.
All right. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left in the program, so I want to give you the opportunity to let our audience know where they can find out more about where they get your books, if you have a website, and things like that.
Sure. Well, probably the easiest way is through Amazon. Jim Willis, I think there's 12 books up there now on Amazon. But what I would love to ask people to do is go to my website, because there's a contact page there, and I'd love to have people share their experiences with me, and that's at www.jimwillis.net. And www.jimwillis.net. And then there's also a Facebook page, jimwillis.author. And I have a YouTube page where I do some reading and some singing and some guitar playing and talking. And there's a couple of my seminars that I've done that are up on YouTube and that kind of thing. So that's probably the easiest way. And I just love to hear from people about this stuff.
Well, a world of information that you have a world of information. And I just want to interject here something that listeners may be interested in. We're just about ready to release an updated version of Psychic and UFO Revelations in the end days. And it's very apropos to what's going on in the world today. It's got interviews with psychics and channelers and about Edgar Casey and a lot of stuff that may be of interest to our followers out there. So that's Psychic and UFO Revelations. Should be up on Amazon. And don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files. And thank you, Tina. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, world.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100, Exploring the Bizarre.